Hello and welcome to This Is MediaCity. I'm Stephen Chapman, and today we are joined by a true broadcasting legend, the one and only Mark Radcliffe, and we talk about all sorts of things from Bowie, the Radio 1 breakfast show, Radio 2 folk show, 6 Music, all sorts of stuff. It is a fantastic insight into a broadcasting legend. Mark, thank you ever so much for joining us on This Is MediaCity.
Nice to see you.
Well, it's brilliant to see you because I feel like I've been listening to you most of my life.
Sorry
actually.
about that.
From the Radio 1 days,
Yeah.
6 Music now, Radio 2.
Yeah.
You've kind of been everywhere that I listen to.
I think the only BBC network I've not been on is Asian Network. I think I've been on all the others and the World Service. I mean, I've got, before that I started at Piccadilly Radio, which was the precursor. I don't know, do you remember Key 103?
I started out on Key 103.
Did you?
Yes.
Okay, right. So before that was called Piccadilly Radio, and I started there in 1979. And so I've actually got about 3.5 years to go for 50 years in radio.
Wow.
Which would be very cool.
There's a book coming out.
So, yeah, I was 21, fresh out of Manchester University. I went to Piccadilly Radio.
Wow.
So, yeah, I'm 67 now. Well, 67 and a half, so I've got 3.5 years to come up to 50 years in radio.
We always start our podcast with these icebreaker questions.
Okay.
This may help me a great deal because
Okay.
I was sitting down yesterday and today and I was thinking, well, where do you start with Mark? What do I ask first? So I thought, actually, these icebreaker questions, which could be random questions about you, might be a way to get me out of where we start.
Okay, so do I pick a card? Right, okay, there we go.
They're in MediaCity yellow. Okay. Biggest inspiration?
Well, I suppose really John Peel in terms of radio, because when I started out, I was just a music nut really. I always just wanted to be in a band. I never thought when I was younger being on the radio. It wasn't really a dream of mine. But then when I became aware of music on the radio, and it became that John Peel was a different kind of presenter who was kind of really passionate about the music, rather than being a kind of daytime DJ who was going to go on to a TV quiz show or something. Nothing wrong with that. I just became aware there were different kinds, and I felt very much that I was going down the John Peel side of things, really. So I suppose John, who then I later produced and got to know, surreally, he once depped for me on my Radio 1 show.
Oh, really?
And that was like, this is wrong, this is just too weird. So I suppose John would have been the radio. And the other people I liked a lot to listen to on the radio, I mean, there have been other inspirations in terms of musicians and people, but in terms of radio, I suppose in a similar vein would have been Johnny Walker and Annie Nightingale, really. They seem to be the people who are sort of, just a bit different to the mainstream smashy and nicey kind of DJs as we've come to know them.
I did a postgraduate course after I finished Manchester University in broadcasting. We had to do something on radio.
Yeah.
And someone said, phone up Johnny Walker, he'll do a chat with you.
Yeah.
And literally he was on the phone for ages.
Yeah,
He
he's
was
a lovely man. Lovely man. Just lost him, of course.
Yeah.
But he could be quite dangerous company to keep. He was a bit of a caner, old Johnny. He was a bit of a rocker. But yeah, he was a really nice guy, and he had one of the great voices. He was just he was just effortlessly cool, Johnny, right to the end, really. So yeah, I had a lot of time for him, yeah.
I'm going to give you one more.
Yeah.
That's set off a stream.
Yeah.
Okay. May well be the same thing, but what drives you?
What drives me? Well, do you know what? Music is the short answer. But one of the things I think I'm most proud about of myself is when I was young, I thought, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I wanted to play in a band. And when I left university, I didn't know what I wanted to do. But I thought, well, if I could do something with music, that would be great. But I also thought, if I'm going to be working for 40 or more years, it's better to do a job that you don't hate. And I thought to myself, well, if I could make enough money to buy a semi-detached house and a hatchback car, which is now £1 million in Bolton, of course, but then it seemed quite a modest aspiration. I won't worry too much about material stuff. If I could just, I'm only passing this way once. So I would really rather be doing something that I might enjoy, so that you came back from your holidays and you never dreaded going back to work. And so now, being, I guess, sort of semi-retired, although I'm in a lovely position in staging life, really, where I'm not building a career. I'm not looking for work. And if people offer me things and I don't fancy it, I don't do it.
I'm glad you're on our team.
Well, well, we're all egomaniacs. We'll all take the opportunity to talk about ourselves. One of my bosses at Radio 2 once said to me, she said, you're all egomaniacs, but the worst of you are the ones disguised as people with no ego. And I know what she means. But really, music, and just enjoy myself, really. It's all been a laugh for the most part. Apart from the Radio 1 breakfast show, it's all been a bit of a breeze.
I was going to avoid the Radio 1.
Well, I don't mind.
Do you know what? I was at the University of Manchester, so this is a time before Media City, obviously, because you're on Oxford Road.
Yeah.
I remember, as someone who was kind of thinking I might like to go into broadcasting, the idea that there were these two guys just so tantalisingly close when I was walking past Oxford Road.
Yeah.
It inspired me to think, actually, I could get a career. I never ended up working in radio, which probably ruins that story. However, but I think there was something about you two there, and obviously I understood like bobbins and things like that. That was a phrase I was aware of, so I think I was probably target market, wasn't I?
Yeah, probably. Well, I mean, that's what people forget, really. I mean, the Mark and Arch on Radio 1 finished in 2004. So I guess then we've been on the afternoons about 7 or 8 years, I think. We had a short stint on the breakfast show, about 9 months. We had 3 years late at night, 10 till midnight. And we'd done other bits of Radio 1 and stuff before that. And what people forget is we were the only people doing network pop shows out of London.
Yeah.
There was nothing. Maybe the odd little bit of Radio 2 weekends, and some specialist music programs that were recorded, but live pop radio, there was nothing. We were like a complete outpost. It still seems we only did it, really. We only got it because I'd worked at Radio 1 in London as a producer, and so my senior producer, a guy who's retired now called John Leonard, and the two of us had a little department called the Popular Music Department on Oxford Road in Manchester, where we did bits of Radio 2, including things like Listen to the Band, which was a brass band programme, and The Organist Entertains, which is a bit of an oxymoron, really. And so they eventually trusted us because we both worked for Radio 1 in London. That was the only way it started, that they gave us an hour a week, I think, to do a show. And but I'd been empowered by, very much by Tony Wilson and Factory Records and that whole music scene, and Tony Wilson was really very, very much, he gave you great belief, that you didn't need to be given permission by someone in London to do it, that you could do it yourself. And we had Buzzcocks, who'd started New Hormones, which was the UK's first independent record label. It felt like we had our own world and we were doing everything. So that was a very kind of inspirational platform, really. I mean, I did go to London and that made a big difference. And I loved working in London. I still love going to London. I'm not anti-London in any way. Just so happened that Manchester was where I lived. And I didn't see why you couldn't play some records and talk in between them from Oxford Road as you could from Oxford Circus in London.
And it was, as I say, it was one of those things, because there was nothing at that time. It's very difficult to imagine now with Media City being here, and you've got
Incredible.
6 music based here.
I know.
Got breakfast. You've got you guys based here, and it's also Radio 1 are broadcasting out of here as well.
I mean, I think when we're on at the weekends, I think every radio network is coming out of Dock House. I think at the same time. I mean, when we were working at Oxford Road, this was derelict land.
Yes.
There wasn't anything here. And then eventually they built a few flats, but that was the start of it, really. I mean, I suppose the first thing in Manchester would have been Castlefield, where Key 103 ended up, didn't they? Those were the first city centre apartments. I remember me and Mark Riley, we started a little independent production company called M&TV, which people thought it was called Music and Television, and it was actually stood for Meat and Two Veg. And people said, you know what you're going to do for an office? You want to buy a flat in Manchester? And we said, don't be stupid. Who's going to want to live in Manchester? You know, we'd be stuck with that forever. Probably be worth £2 million now, but Young Businessman of the Year. But there was nothing in the city centre. My middle daughter, Mimi, lives in the Northern Quarter. And, you know, she thinks, she knows a Manchester now, which when I was a student and working in Manchester, the Northern Quarter was derelict. Ancoats was certainly dark. You never you'd never go to Ancoats. No. There was no spinning fields. There was no New Islington. You certainly never came near Salford. And it still amazes me, you know, I went to watch a gig at the Albert Hall the other day, and I got the tram from Peter Square back to Altrincham. And like, you know, all the way past here to Cornbrook, it's like Gotham City. There's these tower blocks, and none of that was there. Basically, my Manchester extended from sort of the BBC and Oxford Road station to Piccadilly, over to Victoria, and back down to Granada. That was Manchester.
Yeah.
It still is, but that's the little hub in the middle, with all these sprawling complexes on the outside. So it's great to see it thrive and change, but it's a totally different place now.
Can you imagine it back then that we would be in a situation now where it seems it's almost normal that you commission something out of the north of England?
Yeah. Well, I think that's great. I think that it's kind of almost like not even a thought process, because I always thought it was ludicrous that, you know, everybody across the country paid a BBC licence fee, so why would everything be so central? I mean, I understand why, you know, the BBC started there, because news, you need to be close to government, and yeah, I understand that, you know. But it was long overdue before it kind of was decentralised, I think. And now it's amazing. I mean, I never dreamt of it, really.
And if you look at Radio 2 now, you have to come from Bolton to be a presenter there now, don't you?
Do you know, I worked out that 16% of Radio 2's presenters are from Bolton. I mean, it is bizarre that, because there are 4 of us, of which I'm by far the lowest profile. There's Paddy McGuinness, Sarah Cox, and Vernon, all from Bolton. I don't know Vernon very well. Paddy I see most weekends here. And Sarah's lovely. I've known Sarah for many years because, of course, she was on Radio 1 when I was there.
Yeah. Can we kind of reverse back again? Because you arrived early today and we were talking about it because you used to be a producer.
Yeah.
You mentioned it earlier. Was it the John Peel show you were producing down in London, or was it...
Yeah, I used to do John Peel's. I mean, I started as a producer at Piccadilly Radio in Manchester. I started as an assistant producer of drama and classical music. Piccadilly Radio did that.
For Piccadilly? For
Piccadilly. To me, commercial radio is a bit of a sad saga, really, in some ways, because all those first Piccadilly, BRMB in Birmingham, Clyde, Capital, all those stations set up to try and replicate locally what the BBC was doing. So it was very ambitious. It was a really noble endeavour. So the Piccadilly Radio would have documentaries. They would have, you know, local news programmes. They would interview their MPs. They would cover the football matches, the City and United and Bury and Bolton. They would cover all that. They would do some drama with local writers and local actors. They would record the Halley Orchestra and concerts at the Royal Northern College of Music. All of this was done from those little offices in Piccadilly Plaza underneath the Piccadilly Hotel in Manchester. And there was one guy who did drama and classical music, a chap called Tony Hawkins. And so my dad was a journalist, he knew someone, and they wanted someone, so they put me up for it. I think I used to get a student grant, and I think my first wage was less than the student grant. I think I went down from 2,600 to 2,300 is my record. Because I'd done a literature degree, so I knew a bit about drama. And the first gigs I went to with my dad, who was a classical music reviewer and journalist, I was at the Free Trade Hall watching the Halley Orchestra and things like that. So I knew a bit about that. So I started doing that, and when I was there, I just was kind of playing in bands and, you know, got to know Tony Wilson and all these people. And I said to the people at Piccadilly, well, look, we should be playing all this music that's coming out of our city, you know. And they said, well, you're probably right, but we don't know anyone who knows anyone about it. I said, well, I do. And they said, but can you present a radio programme? And I said, well, how hard can that be, really? Because I wasn't trying to be entertaining. I was trying to be John Peel and just tell people what this music was. So I did that for a bit, and then I went down to London, and I was producing mainly sessions for John Peel and a magazine programme called Saturday Live on Saturday afternoons for Radio 1. So, which had live music and live guests. It was Saturday Live, but it was in the afternoon. So those were the things I was doing. That was my working week, really.
So how do you move from doing that when you're thinking, "Oh, all I'm here is just to introduce the music," to moving to the Radio 1 kind of idea with you and Mark Riley, Mark and Lars?
Yeah.
When there was a heck of a lot more to that show than just that. I remember because Oxford Road had really bad windows, so you'd hear roadworks whenever there were songs you didn't like. I remember, but it was very much like it felt like a club that you joined.
Well, I'm glad you say that, because that was how we felt about it, really. I mean, I think the thing about the content and all I don't particularly like the word sketches, really, but I don't know what else to call them, really. All the stuff that we did was really born out of, two things, really. Trying to make each other laugh. You know, I mean, really, that show was only ever done for an audience of about 3 or 4. It was me and Mark trying to make each other laugh, and Chris, the studio engineer, and Michelle, who worked on it. Because we never thought it would last. You know, we just thought we'd just try and have a laugh, and we couldn't really believe that we'd been let loose in BBC studios to do whatever we wanted. And we had nothing else to do. So even when we started on 10 till midnight, we'd go in about kind of midday and just start messing about. Should we do like a piss take a night of the Kraftwerk stories? Yeah, all right. So we'd work for 8 hours on that, recording it on an old Bontempi organ, playing the rhythm on cardboard boxes, because it was fun, going back to what I'd said earlier. And the fact then that it ended up going out at 11:30 at night, and it was 2 minutes long, and we'd spend 8 hours on it. That didn't matter, because it was fun. It was still more productive than anything else we'd have done for 8 hours. We'd probably just sit in the pub and talk rubbish, so we thought we'd just sit on the national airwaves and talk rubbish. But we did work quite hard at it. You know, we were constantly trying to come up with ideas and things, and say, "Oh, what do you think about this? What do you think about, is that funny? Is that," you know? So we did kind of work at it, and then when it became apparent that it wasn't a flash in the pan, then we really had to, we just have to get in every morning and think of stuff again and write.
Did it become more difficult then?
Yes.
Was it the pressure?
Yes, I think so. That we do, it's just the relentlessness of it, really. It was when it became, I think we always thought it would be finite for a couple of years, and we're on at night and you're just messing about, really. And then when we got in the afternoons, and I think it had 8 million listeners at one point, you think, I don't think we really changed our approach. We never really tried to second guess what people wanted. We just, hoped for the best and kept on trying to make each other laugh. But towards the end, it just became like, it ground you down, really. It ground you down, just having to come up with that stuff all the time.
But the afternoon show went on for years as well.
I think about 8 years, I think. And we didn't have any help, really. I mean, we had normal... we had Chris, a studio engineer. We had a producer and an assistant producer. And then we had a mate of ours who wrote some little bits for us if we needed help. So we kind of had 3 people to keep that show going, really. Which was fine. That was normal. But there'd never been a kind of radio show on Radio 1 which had that level of scripted or recorded content before, but we made a rub for our own back, really.
But it's now 21 years since you're going on. Now that I've been googling you and researching more about it, Instagram keeps telling me that you've got tour dates coming up. Well, with Mark.
It started in March last year, so 20 years to the day since it finished. Mark and I have not worked, we never fell out, but we've gone our separate ways. We've not seen each other much in that 20 years, occasionally at Six Music, and fine. And he said, we used to have a band called the Shire Horses.
Was it top 20?
We were in the top 20, I think, for 1 week, 19 maybe. But we was just kind of, we did our own versions of big songs of the day. And
Was it a rip-off of John Squire's band?
Well, it started off, we did John Squire after the Stone Roses called his band the Seahorses, and we called ours the Shire Horses. And we did a song of his, and kind of shtick with that was we said we'd thought of them first and everybody had stolen them off us. That was that. And Mark wanted to do the Shire Horses again, and I really didn't, because I felt that I thought half of it might get us cancelled. I thought, and also it was always a thin act, and I don't know, just like the me of kind of 30 years ago, because it started before, way before the show finished, and the idea of doing that in my mid-60s didn't seem to kind of be a very dignified. I mean, it wasn't dignified at the time, but I was young then, and drinking heavily. So I said, I can't do it, I don't want to do it. But maybe we could do kind of an audience with where we play some clips and we talk about that, So that's what we've been doing. So we started that then, and it's still rolling on. We're doing occasional ones. I mean, I think we do Brighton and Nottingham in the next couple of weeks, and then we've got about half a dozen next year, and then I think that'll be it. We'll probably have done 20, 25 by the end of it. But, we call it an exercise in nostalgia and celebration, nostalgia and pension pot enhancement. But it's gone great. The rooms have been rocking with laughter, so it does seem to be pretty much a victimless crime,
Yeah, I think there's people of a certain age, and I think that a lot of them about my age who just remember that. Because when I mentioned I was interviewing you to there's a few people, and I was like, oh, tell him the time when he put the Boo Radley's Wake Up Boo on, and they'd redone the intro, so it just looped for about 3 minutes before the song started, and things like that. It's just like things like that. And I actually mentioned it to a guy who you used to work with at Top of the Pops.
Oh, right.
And the White Room.
All right.
And he said...
Who's that?
A guy called Chris Cowie.
I know Chris Cowie, I do, yeah.
He said, ask him about when he introduced Prince on the White Room.
Oh yeah, I think he had a veil on. I think I said Prince is here, and he's got his beekeeper's gear on. I think, it was amazing. Really, this was how far it went. Really, that like from just. I don't know what I can say. From dicking about on the, just trying to make each other laugh. Then suddenly you find yourself on national television.
Which was Channel 4, wasn't it?
Channel 4. Introducing Prince and David Bowie and Stevie Wonder. And you're thinking, well, how's this happened? It was just like a dream, really. It was surreal. So just like, we'd always sort of, taking the piss out of things. And then it seemed like if you got to the biggest stages and you stopped doing that, you were somehow betraying your principles and everybody. You'd think you'd sold out. So you had to be a smart aleck, even right till the end, even if it kind of, got you some funny looks from Prince, but it does seem amazing.
You wouldn't have seen it through the veil.
Through the veil. I mean, we had Little Richard on the White Room, I mean, younger listeners might not know who that is, but he was one of the founding fathers of rock and roll. And I said, here he is, Little Richard, one of the founding fathers of rock and roll. And he said, no, I'm not playing through that intro, he said, I am the founding father. I said, okay, fair enough, we'll do it again, we'll do it your way then, here he is, the Fromage de Pompadour, the greatest man who's ever lived, the founder of rock and roll. And then he like winked and played, Tutti Frutti or something. And you think, all the things have happened to you, like getting to know David Bowie a bit and sitting in Abbey Road with Paul McCartney while he plays Blackbird on his acoustic guitar. You think, how has this happened from just messing about with Mark in that little dark room in Manchester,
Because that little dark room, because I was going to ask you about the Bowie, the Paul McCartney, but there's also, I mean, Radiohead became...
Yeah.
Dare I say, fans of the show.
Oh, yeah.
Kylie did voiceovers for you. It was even though it felt like it was you guys just messing around in this room, the kind of the reverberations of it. I know Kylie wasn't the Kylie she is now, as in it was a different era of Kylie.
I think that was one of the things really that, like, Bowie, who was my big idol, and Mark Riley's too. We had a shared passion for David Bowie. He wasn't a megastar then when we were doing our show. He probably would have filled the Academy, but he wouldn't have filled the arena.
Which is frightening to think of.
And he's David Bowie.
Yeah.
He was, he had made some fairly dodgy albums in the 80s, and he was sort of finding his way back. And so I think and Kylie, similarly, her career fell off a cliff, and she did a sort of indie-based album. I think she did some stuff with the Manics on it,
wasn't it? Yeah.
And so she was quite. I don't know whether grateful is the right word, but she was relieved certainly that there was a national radio show that would still have her on, and so she did all our jingles. So she would do all these phrases that we gave her to read. Mark and Lard, are you looking at their pint, Michael, and things like that. She later said that she was. very grateful for that, because while nothing was happening with the music, that kept her voice on the national airwaves.
Right.
And so it just so happened that that we kind of found these people where they were a bit more accessible, I think, really.
Can I ask you about, and I'm afraid to say this wrong, the bushometer?
The bushometer, yeah, well, that came much later when I was on. That was after Mark and Lard, and so I was doing. I back to late at nights on Radio 2, 10 till midnight, I think, and Kate Bush came up. I'm a big fan of Kate Bush, and I said, "Oh," and she hadn't made a record for ages. And so I said, "Okay, what are you doing? Give us a ring and let us know you're okay."
This is on the radio,
on the
not
radio.
phoning her up.
No, not the I didn't. I didn't phone her. And then she, and so then we used to put a picture of Kate Bush and whoever was on the show that day on this like a cardboard accumulator. We call this the Bushometer, which went up the studio wall and eventually went up the studio wall, out of the studio and down the corridor outside. So we did that, and the Bushometer. And then it became apparent she was going to release an album called Ariel, a double album. And they said, "Oh, well, we should try and get it. Do you know anyone who knows us?" And I said, funnily enough, the guy who runs EMI Records, there's a guy called Tony Wadsworth, who I'm still in touch with. I was at school with. I said, "I'll give Tony a ring."
Lucky.
That was lucky. So I said, "Tony, I'm sure she won't, but hey, this is what we do in the Bushometer, blah, blah." And then he phoned me back and he said, she says, "Yeah, okay." I'm like, "Wow, really?" So I went down to her house in, then she wanted my phone number so we could chat before we do it, and then he was like, "Kate Bush is ringing." And she's saying, "No," she said, "Yeah, come down to the house, then we'll chat about it." She says, "I'm a bit busy," she said, "so I don't think I'll have time to cook anything, but I'll get some cheese flans from the supermarket. Is that all right?" I said, "Yeah, that sounds fine." So we went down to her house. She's moved now. It was somewhere near Reading, I think. And she answered the door herself. She shifted some washing off the kitchen stool so we could sit down, and it was like the Bowie and the Prince thing and the McCartney, and can't you think it's Kate Bush? It's like me and her sitting on a couch, like me and you now, and it's Kate Bush.
Except with your cheese flan.
Except we had cheese flan. Yeah.
We've kind of let the side down.
Yeah. And then she. I've interviewed about 3 or 4 times, I think, but she's really lovely. And when I was ill, because I had some time off with throat and neck cancer, she phoned me up a couple of times to find out how I was doing.
Oh, brilliant!
So it's really nice to know these people, the bigger they are, the kind of more. In my experience, the really big names, if they decide to do something, they do it with complete kind of grace because they don't have to promote anything. Mick Jagger and Bruce Springsteen don't need to talk to me, but if they do, then they really engage with it and give you some time, And they're very good company because they've nothing to prove. They're not trying to be cool and they're not trying to mow it, but they are who they are and very confident in who they are. And so, in some ways, they're the easiest people to interview.
Is there one you look back on and go, that was special, or is it just because I know a lot of these have won awards, and I don't need to go into them because Kate Bush has won one award for you and things like that. But is there one that you look back on and go, yeah, that was special. That was a special.
Well, I think I'll always come back to Bowie really, because there's never been a musician or an artist who's been more special to me than him, and the idea that he's sitting with him in a studio and he's like. He was reading the Viz Annual, he had a real playful sense of humour. And, he was signing my copy of Ziggy Stardust, which I bought with my paper round money in Bolton. And suddenly he's here and that, it's just like how far have I travelled, And so the idea that I had David Bowie's email, I could say, "Oh, what do you think of this?" And he'd write back, and he always signed it DB in lowercase, so it's like a little symbol. Sometimes you look at it and you think, that's David Bowie in New York who's writing that to me. Oh, hi, Mark, blah, blah, blah. It's like, I never lost, I think I never lost that kind of knowing how lucky I was and how the sliding doors had taken me to this place. And at any point it could have ended. It certainly could have ended after the Radio 1 Breakfast show, and think that we were very lucky to be kept on then. I think we were quite lucky to be sacked sort of less than halfway through a contract. So it was probably quite expensive for them to get rid of it. They probably had to pay us. They probably had to pay us for another year and a half. And they thought, well, if we're paying them, we might as well get them to do something. And Nicky Campbell left in the afternoons, fortunately. Thanks, Nicky. And so we, so we've kind of were given another chance by quite a benevolent management regime led by Matthew Bannister at Radio 1, who again I'm still in touch with, and who's who was he believed in us. He was very kind to us.
And regretted signing that football-style manager contract with you, presumably.
Well,
but not in the long term.
Yeah.
Now, contractually, of course, I have to ask you about what you're doing now. And one of them is you're back on the breakfast show after going on about the breakfast show much.
Weekend breakfast, which is a different beast, I think.
Yeah, and you've replaced your beast as well. You've got rid of a ride in, replaced it with a Stuart McConey.
That's right. Yes. I mean, we were on the afternoons that started in the evenings on Radio 2. I was on Radio 2 late night, and I said to Leslie Douglas, who was running it at that point, I just don't like this. I've got young kids. I don't want to go to bed at 2 a.m. and try and sleep through them. I don't want to do it, really. And she said, well, okay, I'll move it mid-evening. I said, okay. And then me and Stuart bumped into each other. I think he was launching a book, and we were at the Britain's Protection in Manchester, and we sort of chatted, and we'd done programmes together, and we thought, oh, maybe sometime we'll do something. And I think he'd just been offered the breakfast show on 6 Music, actually. And then, but the aforementioned John Leonard was there, and I think he must have talked to Leslie Douglas, and she said, this is a great idea. Why don't we start it like on this new show when we move you? So we did. And so that was okay. And then they moved us to 6 Music. I think Joe Wiley took over the evenings at that point on Radio 2. So they moved us to 6 Music in the afternoons, and that was good. And then I got ill, and then during that time they moved us to Weekend Breakfast, and I was a little bit resistant to that at first, mainly because I'd had such a terrible experience doing a breakfast show before, and also was trying to avoid getting up early. I mean, let's be honest about it. I mean, who wants to do that? But I think that it has, and it starts later now. It used to start at 7. It starts at 8. Which is quite different. There's a big difference between getting up at 5:30 and 6:30. I think at 6 o'clock feels vaguely like it's early, but it's the start of the day.
It feels a bit normal.
Anything before 6 feels still like the night shift. And Stuart and I think as it's gone on, it's become. It's barely a radio show, really. It's a bit like it's a conversation.
Yeah.
It's almost like a live podcast, but with some records in it.
And eating crisps.
And eating crisps. Yeah. And just what stream of consciousness. It's really going back to the very basic idea that me and Mark had of trying to make each other laugh, really. And the thing that's good about it, that perhaps podcasts can never replicate, is you just kind of get this barrage of stuff coming in. So you say, I saw David Beckham, buying a pizza the other day, and he had a top hat on or something, and someone would say, oh, do you know what? I've just seen Paul Gascoigne, and he's got a tam o'shanter on, and he was eating a kebab, and so then it morphs, and you all you're doing is kind of filtering what's coming towards you. So it kind of creates itself, really. It generates its own material. So and we love that, and just reacting to that and making it a live experience, and I think that one of the things that really solidified that was that we did it live from Dock House all the way through lockdown. So I think people were very, very, were desperate for kind of personal communication, weren't they, at that point? And the idea that we were there doing it and they could write in, there was a real connection, I think, because most things were recorded. We were actually deemed essential workers, which I thought was funny because we weren't frontline medical staff. On the other hand, I do believe that entertainment and interaction. I was desperate for the police to stop me on my way to work.
Just to tell them.
Said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm an essential worker, mate. Don't worry about that." And I think then that very much solidified that show. Really, I think.
Is that what keeps you going in a way? That because it seems to me when you listen to the show that conversation between your listeners and they feel that they're sitting in the same room as you almost. Is that the thing that makes radio so much different from any other medium?
I think probably. I think, when you're looking for some kind of connection, you talked about it being a club before, you're looking at some kind of sense of belonging, I think. I think that, if you're a radio presenter doing something like that, the thing you're after more than anything else, the thing you're trying to achieve really is warmth, I think, so that people feel welcomed and not intimidated by it and everything, because they don't feel they have to be experts on music to listen to it, the old high fidelity thing and all that sort of thing. I think, and we are quite interested in what people are doing, and that's why I think at weekend people are in a different state of mind, aren't they? Because they might be up early, but they're doing something that they've chosen to do, or they're taking the kids somewhere, or they're going on a park run, or they're going on a hike, or they're meeting family, or they're going to cook something, or they're going to bake a cake, or whatever they're doing, and you kind of tap into that really, and I often think it's a bit like a kind of a patchwork quilt of things, really. You know what I mean? It's like a lot of little pictures that come together to make one thing, and it's quite a sort of chintzy and quaint and cozy sort of thing, really. All these people, and I don't mean this in a disparaging way, but all these little experiences sort of connect and make one big sort of experience, but it's made up of tiny little pictures. Do you know what I mean?
No, I know exactly what you mean.
So you kind of get, without it being sort of too full of itself, you do get a snapshot of life as it is lived in, on these islands in those hours, and I do really like that, and I think that people who listen when they're on holiday, or people who expats and things who listen, they say, it just kind of feels like I'm home when I listen to this,
We had Chris Hawkins on here the other day, and he was saying how much freedom you get as well with what you can play on Six Music as well. Does that help kind of? I imagine you and I can only imagine yours and Stuart's discussions about what you get, because your record collections must be some of the most diverse out there, I would have thought.
Well, I think we're both of a certain age, and we both like a lot of things. Some of the things we share a passion for, other things sort of are a mystery to each other. I think one of the things that unites Stuart and I is that we never have accepted the concept of guilty pleasures.
Yeah.
So it's like, why, if you like it, why would you be guilty? People used to say, "Oh, ABBA's my guilty pleasure," and like, what does that mean? It means that someone else somewhere has decided it's not cool to like ABBA, therefore it's wrong to admit it. Well, I've never bought that. I'm very happy to say I like the Carpenters and I like Little Sims. I don't think why would you rule anything out? If you like it, that's all that matters. It's not right or wrong. So I think that there are all sorts of things that we do like that feed into it. On the other hand, there is a playlist at Six Music, but I quite like that because I'm 67, Stuart's 62 or something. The idea that you would want a show on national radio, and we're hoping that people from kids will listen. Yeah. So the idea that all the music should be chosen by two pensioners seems to me completely wrong. So the idea that there's a music team at Six Music who will play some things, and I'm hearing things that I wouldn't necessarily have heard, and I might not like some of them, but that's okay, I've heard it. It's a record, it's 3 minutes. There'll be another one along in a minute. And there are things I probably wouldn't have heard that I absolutely love, And so I think that, you don't want to be, I think one of the things that keeps us going is it's not an oldies show. I've got friends who've left Radio 2, left BBC, and gone to work for other networks, Greatest Hits and all these things. And to me, the idea that all you're ever going to do is play Bryan Adams and Queen, and that's going to be the whole of the rest of your broadcasting life.
I think there's a Jean-Paul Sartre play about that, isn't
it? I know. I mean, that's terrifying to me. I'd rather not do it than that. I mean, I don't particularly like Bryan Adams or Queen, but even if the idea was I was only ever going to play Stevie Wonder and David Bowie again till the end of time and nothing new, I don't want to do that. I'm not interested in that. If you're interested in travel you wouldn't just go back to the same places over and over again. You might go occasionally, but you'd want to see. If you're interested in food, you might want to try different restaurants or new recipes. The idea you get to a certain age and say, do you know what? I really love cheesy beans on toast. I'm only going to eat that from now. I mean, I do love cheesy beans on toast. I mean, I probably could eat that every day for the rest of my life, and I'd probably be quite happy. I'm not particularly.
But you wouldn't just be listening to Bryan Adams on
No.
loop. I also have to ask you, because you've got another show on Radio 2, which is a lot more. I like to go. I kind of, when you were originally saying how you were just wanted to talk about the music and you were doing a link and it was all about the music, I kind of get the feeling that your folk show on Radio 2 is a bit more like going back to those days.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. So in a way, I've got the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
I can have a laugh with Stuart, but I've got this program which is, you know, the music is front and centre. I'm just the sort of conduit, really. Yeah, I love doing that. You know, I mean, I think that I've always loved folk music. People say but people are so stupid, you know, because they'll say, I used to have an electronic duo called Oon, which I played gigs with, and people said, I thought you liked folk music. I said, well, right, so what? I'm not allowed to like this as well, am I? Because I do a folk show, I'm only allowed to like that. Who said that was a rule? And so, but the folk music, I think, you know, when you look at its kind of relationship to the kind of the voice of the. I'm always struggling to count, you know, the working people. I hate it when the government say working people. You know, there are some billionaires who are working people, aren't they? You know, and ordinary people. I don't know, but I think that folk music has carried the voice of kind of the working man and woman throughout the history of music, really. Perhaps even before that, you know, an oral tradition of, you know, poetry and things, you know, almost like goes back to the Canterbury Tales or something. Yeah. It's kind of a musical manifestation of the history of these islands, really. And a lot of organic and brilliantly played but atmospheric music, which is a very different kind of function of music, I think, to Taylor Swift or something, you know. I mean, and not remotely knocking that. As I hope you know by now, I wouldn't knock anything really. There's stuff I don't like, but I wouldn't knock it. And so that feels like the folk scene is very welcoming and everybody's very connected, and you sort of. Like you were talking about a club, really doing the folk show on Radio 2, it sort of really gives you access to its own world.
Yeah,
you know, and yeah, so I do love that, and I always think that's a little bit like a podcast because it's only an hour, and people say, "Do you wish it was longer?" And in a way, I do, because then you could play more things. But on the other hand, I think that people will give you an hour. People listen in a very different way to an hour than they do to 2 hours. Most people in 2 hours will need to go to the toilet or make a cup of tea or do something. Whereas the folk show for an hour, 57 minutes once the news is over. If you get a big glass of red wine or something and sit by the fire, they will give you an hour. And so they listen intently. And so I like that.
And you kind of have to, because the lyrics are so important in folk music, aren't they?
Yeah.
The other thing I should mention, because we're coming up to Christmas, and some people out there will be thinking, if only there was a book involving a dog and a man in Italy.
That's very kind, thank you, yeah.
And I've got to pronounce it right, it's et tu, isn't it?
Et tu cavapoo.
Yeah.
Yes, because it's Latin, et tu,
Yeah.
et tu Brute.
Yes.
See, it was a Julius
And
Caesar.
it's Rome, isn't it?
It's Rome. So last year, for 3 months, me and my wife Bella and cavapoo Arlo drove down. We stayed in Rome. I had a sabbatical. We stayed in Rome for 3 months. And while I was there, I was walking around the city every day, and I kept thinking, what does this look like to a dog 8 inches off the ground? You know, and he was thinking, this is rubbish. These are just all old stones, you know. And I'm like, yeah, but this is the Forum, and we're going to the Colosseum, you know. So I thought it was quite an interesting conversation between me and him, really, like all dog owners, certainly obsessed dog owners like me. I think I know what he's thinking, and,
Yes.
you know, he can't talk, but he's saying things to me, you know, and the way he looks at me and cocks his head. So we did this, and then Bella did some lovely drawings. And so we just did it, really, while we were there. We thought, you know, it's almost like a project, and we'll just get a few made up for friends.
Yeah.
And then my agent saw it, and she said, what are you doing with this? I said, oh, it's just a thing, you know. And she said, well, hang on a minute. And so then she got the she talked to a lot of publishers, and we finished up in the Sunday Times top
bestseller,
10.
weren't you?
Bestseller. And so, yeah, in fact, we're talking now on a Wednesday. Tomorrow at the Stratford Literary Festival, we do our last plugging session.
You and the Cavapoo.
Yeah. He's very mellow, and he is brilliant because he's very obsessed with me and focused on me. So what we do, we keep him at the side of the stage, and we go on, and people talk to me, and they say, he's desperate to get to me, but he doesn't bark. He's quiet, and so then they say, oh well, where is he? Can we see Arlo? And I said, oh yeah, he is here. And so then someone releases him at the side of the stage, and he bounds across and jumps up and sits on my knee. And I'm like, the audience goes, oh, I'm like, well done, Arlo. That's another 50 books we've sold there. So,
I think you need to train my dogs, because if you let ours go, they'd be in the audience.
Well, we've done TV. We've done all kinds of TV shows, and everybody said what you said. Like, my dog would be causing mayhem in here. But he's just so mellow. I don't know what it is.
So the other thing, you mentioned it earlier on, and as we wrap up here, is one of the things that struck you recently is cancer, and you have obviously had your recovery session. You're now back on air. Your voice is there, which I imagine was probably one of the scary moments amongst everything in there, because it was your throat, wasn't it?
It was. They took a thing the size of a walnut off the back of my tongue, and then something the size of an apple out the side of my throat on the lymph node. The idea you've been doing a 3-hour radio show every day and singing and doing gigs with this in your throat, it's amazing what the body adapts to.
And how
really.
Did you know them? Because they must have been fairly big, though.
Well, I had a beard, and then I was on holiday in Cornwall, and I got hot and it was itchy. I thought, I'm getting rid of this. I'm shaving it off, and then I found a lump in my neck, and one thing led to another. I did have to sign a waiver when they were operating. I had surgery and radiotherapy and chemotherapy. Then I had to sign a waiver because they said this is very near the vocal cords. And so you might have a different voice, you might struggle to speak, but... if the alternative is dying, it's not really a decision that takes you long to make.
Fair enough.
What I mean? And the world's not going to stop turning if I'm not on the radio. And I could always have written something, or retirement's fine. When you're really faced with as brutal and as blunt a choice as that, it's easy, isn't it? It's really easy, because we would all, to quote Trainspotting, choose life, wouldn't we? So it was a really long, dark, hard time, but. It's in some ways, and then I subsequently had pancreatic cancer as well. But I mean, in some ways, it's the worst thing that ever happened to me. But in some ways, it genuinely kind of is one of the best, because I was 60 then, and I'm 67. So all this time and talking to you and doing things like this is a joy, because this is all bonus time. This is all stuff that may never have happened. You know what I mean? So every day, really, I kind of feel. This is great. This is so great. And I do my little folk gigs with my acoustic partner, David Boardman, and I go to the Strange Nightingale in a couple of weeks and play to a room of 70 people. I'm like, this is so great, and the book's in the charts, and, everything's great. And I can have a laugh with Stuart, and I'm going in now to do the folk show, and, and so I feel really lucky, really. And I feel kind of that all those words that I said to my younger self, people say, what would you say to your younger self? And I'd say to my younger self, you were kind of right. You were kind of right. Just do things that you'll enjoy and don't worry too much about money. Now, obviously, it's easy for me to say because I was on the radio on breakfast. Obviously, it would be disingenuous of me to pretend I haven't earned any money, because, at times I've earned quite a lot. But, I was right all those years ago to kind of take that line, really, and take a chance, I think.
You bought that Bowie album on a paper round and got it signed by him.
Exactly.
That's enough for anyone,
exactly.
Isn't it? Surely.
Exactly. Yeah. But I feel like, and that's why I would kind of like to get to 50 years. I don't know. It just feels like, it'd be stupid to stop now. We'll just keep going.
You may as well.
May as well.
You've got this far.
Exactly. May as well.
Thank you ever so much
for
nice
giving
to
up
see you.
so
Thank
much
you
for
your
much.
time for
Thanks
us
a lot.
as well.
No, it's great fun. Thanks.
Thank you for watching This Is Media City. Remember to please like, subscribe, comment and share. This Is Media City is a 39 Pictures production on behalf of Media City and in partnership with the University of Salford, and all the team behind the scenes are graduates and undergraduates from the university. We will see you for next week with another special guest. Next week we are going to be hearing from children in need. The production team are Meg Bond, Tegan Easton, Akila Hewitt and James Young.